We are 8 weeks into the 2023 NFL season, and one of the stories of the season so far has undoubtedly been the one and only Puka Nacua of the Los Angeles Rams. Yes, Puka Nacua, a guy who over 95% of football fans had not even heard of prior to the season, is dominating the league. The 5th-round rookie receiver out of BYU hit the ground running in Week 1 and hasn't looked back once, proving more and more each week that this is no fluke. Superstar wideout Kupp, who won the Triple Crown and Super Bowl MVP less than 2 years ago, returned from injury in Week 5, and many assumed Nacua would fade back into the shadows, as he was allegedly just a product of the system and the volume. I'm pleased to say, however, that the reports of Nacua's demise were greatly exaggerated, as they came from people who hadn't actually turned on the tape or dove deep into the numbers. Puka Nacua is legit, folks, and he is here to stay. Honestly, it should not have been too surprising to see Nacua develop an instant chemistry with quarterback Matthew Stafford, considering he became the 3rd member of the Breakfast Club as far back as OTAs, the Breakfast Club being the nickname of the daily film appointment Stafford and Kupp started in 2021. Disclaimer, all statistics referenced in this video, unless otherwise stated, will be through Week 8, i.e. the Matthew Stafford games, because Brett Rippon is not a real NFL quarterback. Breaking all of these long-held NFL records is what is shocking, however. Through 4 weeks, Nacua had 501 receiving yards, breaking Anquan Boldin's record of 464 that had stood since 2003. In fact, Nacua's first 4 games were so great that he had even had the record for most receiving yards in a player's first 5 games, before he had even played his 5th game. However, with Kupp returning and immediately seizing hold of his standard target share, surely Nacua's numbers would drop off drastically, right? Well, let's put it this way. Through Week 8, Nacua has 795 receiving yards, which is the record for the most yards in a player's first 8 career games, just edging out Jamar Chase's mark from 2021. Only one other player has even 700 yards. Marcus Colston and Stephon Diggs were 2 famous wide receivers drafted on day 3 in recent years who had hot starts, and they were 95 and 191 yards behind Nacua's pace respectively. And it's not just an era thing either, as Nacua's numbers are just as impressive versus his peers this year. Only 3 receivers have over 750 yards through Week 8 this season: Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, and Puka Nacua. Additionally, Nacua's 61 receptions is tied for 2nd in the entire NFL this season. That is in fact another record through a player's first 8 games, with no other wideout having even more than 52. Nacua has also been very consistent so far this season. He has 5 or more receptions in 6 of his 8 games played. Only 5 wideouts have more such games. And if we up that number, only Hill, Diggs, and Michael Pittman Jr. have more games with 8+ receptions than Nacua's 4. It's the same thing with yardage numbers. Nacua has 4 100-yard games already, which is behind just AJ Brown, Hill, Diggs, and Amon-Ra St. Brown for the league lead this year. And it's an NFL record through a player's first 8 games. Nacua also already has 3 games with 145+ receiving yards this year. Only Tyreek Hill, who is having a truly historic season, has more. Nacua is also the only player to ever have 3 such games in his first 8 contests, and only 4 wideouts had even just 2. To put it further into context, only Hill and Justin Jefferson, with 5 apiece, had more 145-yard games throughout the entirety of the 2022 season. And it's not like Nacua is just racking up meaningless stump-offs to pad his numbers either. 38 of his receptions have gone for first downs this season, which is 4th best in the entire league. He also has 33 catches that have gained 10 or more yards, which is behind just the 2 best receivers this year for the most in football. Even more impressive, he has 17 receptions that have gained 20+ yards this year, which is actually tied with AJ Brown for the NFL lead. So he's racking up a ton of catches, but the majority of those catches are super impactful for the Rams offense. Regardless of how you mess around and make those numbers sing, they are always going to be super impressive. But in the end, they're still just standard box score numbers, and some people will dismiss them no matter what they say. Which, to some degree, is fair, because one should never take just box scores into account in their analysis. So let's throw some more advanced analytics and grades based off of film into the mix. Nacua is averaging 2.66 yards gained for every route he has run this season, which is the 7th best mark in the NFL. Yards per route run is a much more stable and indicative stat than yards per catch or yards per target. Nacua is also a top 10 receiver in the NFL based on PFF grading this season, as his 84.6 grade is above the likes of CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and Keenan Allen, just to name a few. In fact, Nacua's 84.6 grade is 2nd among all rookies, behind just Jalen Carter and ahead of Devin Witherspoon, who both already look like superstars. Nacua's grade is nearly 5 full points higher than the next best first-year offensive player. But again, some people will just instantly dismiss all numbers of any kind, no matter how next level they are. So let's turn on the tape. It seemed Nacua specifically sought to destroy all the narratives against the Eagles in Week 5. Underneath routes, schemed open, only producing because of Cooper Kupp's absence, you name it. It was Kupp's first game in nearly a full year and he received a whopping 12 targets. But Nacua still managed his own with 11 targets himself. Late in the first half, Nacua was lined up man-to-man against last year's second-team All-Pro James Bradberry. It was 3rd and 10 with under a minute to go till the break, so it was an obvious passing down. Off the snap, Nacua gave a quick stutter step to get Bradberry off balance, and then he just raced behind him while winning the hand fight down the field to gain a few extra inches of separation. In the front corner of the end zone, he showed late hands at the catch point so that the pass couldn't be broken up. Bradberry led the NFL in combined forced incompletions and interceptions in 2022, so winning a contested catch against him is no small feat. Again, no fancy schemes or motion was used to get Nacua open. He wasn't on a crosser and there was no misdirection. He just straight up beat a guy who has been one of the league's best corners in recent years, man-to-man, both during the route and at the catch point. That's legit. Nacua is one of those players who just always seems to be open, even if one of the knocks on him coming out was that he wasn't a super fluid route runner. He's just a very intelligent player who knows how to find all the soft spots in coverage. All it took was one quick stab at the snap for Nacua to get Steelers corner Levi Wallace off balance to blow past him on a shallow cross. And perhaps his biggest strength is that he always maximizes his yardage output on every play. He doesn't dance around and make all these unnecessary jukes in an attempt to break the big one on every down. Instead, as soon as he makes the catch, he instantly sticks his foot in the ground and gets upfield. He rarely goes out of bounds or down on his own. Instead, Nacua loads his shoulder in an attempt to break tackles or push forward for a few extra yards. There's a reason he is 4th in the league in yards after the catch and 3rd in receiving yards after contact. Being fearless in the face of contact is a reason why Nacua was able to make one of the most impressive catches of the season against the Steelers. Again, versus Levi Wallace, Nacua blew past him to get open down the field on a go route. However, the throw was late, which gave both Wallace and the safety Minkah Fitzpatrick time to catch up to him as the ball arrived. Nacua knew that a big hit was coming, but instead of shying away from the moment, he leapt into the air, snagged the ball with both hands, and, while taking a huge shot from Fitzpatrick in the back to push him to the sideline, nimbly toe-tapped both feet inbounds to successfully complete the 32-yard play. Someone who is just a product of a system would not be able to hang on to that ball. But everybody's highlight plays are going to look great. That's what they are by definition. Let's look at Puka Nacua's standard, what he does on just a regular play. Like I alluded to earlier, what makes Nacua so good and why Matthew Stafford insists on throwing to him so often is because of how consistent he is. He always makes things easier on the QB. Check this route against the 49ers. He's just running a standard 10-yard stop route, one of his most run routes. Nacua knows he's going to be bumped by the linebacker, so he gives a bit back of his own by extending his arm so that his momentum is not totally disrupted. And as soon as he starts to break down at the top of his route, his eyes are already turning back to his QB. As I mentioned before, Nacua is not the most refined route runner, so his break is not as clean as it should be. But because Nacua is always where he's supposed to be, and because he turned his head so quickly, Stafford can still just quickly fire it in. And just as quickly as Nacua turned his eyes back to Stafford to catch the ball, he flips his eyes back upfield as soon as he secures the ball to maximize yardage. He doesn't break the tackle, but because he flipped so quickly, he was able to see where the defender was coming from and gain an additional 5 to 6 yards before being brought down. All things considered, this was an unspectacular play, but stacking unspectacular plays like this is why Nacua this year has been so, spectacular. And the fact that Nacua is as good as he is already while being the shaky route runner that he is, shows the potential that he has moving forward. So, what can we expect exactly from Nacua moving forward? After 8 games, Nacua is on pace for a 129 catch season with 1,689 yards. Obviously, that is not going to happen whatsoever, especially with Cooper Kupp back. But even if we just extrapolate the 4 games that Nacua has played with Kupp, he is still on pace for a 93 catch season with 1,253 yards. That is an awesome season for any rookie wide receiver, but especially one drafted 177th overall. There is no reason to believe that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua cannot coexist. Just stereotyping off of looks, many people seem to believe that the two are the same player, but that is not the case. Kupp has generally been a slot receiver throughout his career, and that has remained true this season, as 52% of his snaps have come lined up in the slot. Nacua, meanwhile, has played a whopping 65.3% of his snaps from out wide. Both receivers run mostly underneath routes, but Nacua largely runs slants and stops, whereas Kupp gets his due off of crossing routes. They play different roles. Nacua drew a lot of comparisons to ex-Rams receiver Robert Woods before the season, and he is more so filling that role, except Nacua is a bigger, stronger, and more physical version of Woods. And yes, it was before Kupp was the monster that he is now, but remember, Woods did have back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons for these Rams back in the day. Now, since Kupp has returned from injury, he has received a 33.6% target share for LA. During that same time, Nacua has seen a 29.1% target share. And as we saw against the Steelers, not only can these two receivers coexist, but Puka can be the primary receiver in any given game. What I mean to say is that they will both continue to get theirs regardless. What Puka Nacua is doing this season is largely viewed as just this fun story, mostly for fantasy players who are lucky enough to pick him up. But imagine if this was JSN or Jordan Addison who was putting these numbers up. People would be flocking to anoint him the next superstar wideout in the league. And I mean, how can you not root for this kid? Aside from the heartfelt story of it all, Puka just seems like such a nice and humble guy. After scoring the game-winning touchdown against the Colts, Puka was nearly late to the locker room to receive the game ball because he was too busy signing autographs for all the Rams fans in the stands. I'll say this much. You better get those autographs in while you can now, because his star is only going to continue rising. Puka Nacua is legit, and he is not going anywhere anytime soon.